sure your questions will lead me into different areas, but looking forward to tomorrow night to get back home against a Michigan team that's got a lot of talent. I know it's late in the year to play somebody for the first time, but a good team that's had ups and downs, much like we have. But when they've clicked, they've been pretty impressive to watch on film. So, like I said, looking to get back home. I think they tell me they have a blackout going on tomorrow night. Is there? Student section does. So that'll be interesting. And let's go to your questions.
Greg, you guys have 3 in a row now at home. How important is it for you to build something, use that for momentum to get through the rest of the season strong?
Well, we got to play better basketball, better than the last 15 minutes. I thought the first 25 Saturday were pretty good. The last 15, obviously the polar opposite. So I think that's the biggest thing is regardless of where we were going to play the next game and not looking at it just game, not looking, beyond one, because that's what's most important. But play the game the right way, play the game how we can play it and how we've shown to play it. Because when we do, we're a pretty good team. When we don't, we see what happened there on Saturday.
Greg, you said on Saturday that it's all be about the response that this team has, and certainly you're going to find out a lot about them tomorrow. I know you've only had them for one day. How'd you like how they handled Sunday when you went through film, which probably had to be a little bit difficult for them, and then you got them back on the court? Are they still upbeat? Do you still have confidence with this group?
Yes. I thought they practiced really well yesterday. The film, as I've always said for years, film doesn't lie. So what I saw and felt and thought personally played itself out, if not even more, on film. And so we went through it, and like I said, got to be better. I mean, we do so many good things in the first, to get that lead, and then do a complete 180 in terms of who we need to be and how we need to play. So they understood it, and I think there was no doubt coming out of that film session. And then I always, again, watch the response because they went from film to lifting, and then I get the report from how they are in the weight room and then how do they respond and react on the court. And I thought they responded really, really well. And it's same thing report I got from the room. And so you're always concerned about those things and watch those things regardless, whether we've won 10 in a row or not. I always try to gauge that every day to see where they're at, and I was very happy and impressed with how they responded yesterday.
Coach, I'll be that guy because I usually am. Rumor has I just saw on the internet that you had some sort of run-in with Coach Howard last year. I know that you guys have probably put that behind you. It's Valentine's Day tomorrow. How much are you looking forward to seeing Coach Howard tomorrow?
Yeah, I haven't talked to Coach Howard since media day. We haven't, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, it's you get to this late in the year and you haven't played, and we still have to play him twice. So that's all behind us. Hey, I get it. We're all competitors in this. You're not in this if you're not, and if you don't have some competitive juices in you and those go in different ways, then you're probably not going to last very long in this. And he's obviously a tremendous competitor, was as a player, and obviously is as a coach. And Jocko, I really go back to, in spite of that, it was unfortunate for everybody that occurred last year, and that's behind us. I have no problem with Juwan. I respect him, and what I go back to is I told him at media day, and have shared this with others, I had never met him until the week of Coach Howard Moore's accident. And the second time I flew over to Ann Arbor, I was there on the day of the accident, or the next day when it happened on a Friday night. I was there on Saturday. And then about Wednesday or Thursday, flew back over again. And it was ironically on the day that Juwan had his press conference being introduced as Michigan's new head coach. And as I walked into the hospital room in the intensive care area where Howard and Jarrell were, and I actually had Coach Ryan with me, flew with me that day, the second time I went over, and and a couple other people. Jawan was at Howard's bedside, and that was my first introduction meeting with Jawan. So that's, and we've talked about that, and we talked about that back in the fall at the media day, and he's shared his concerns about Howard and asked about Howard a lot. So that showed me who Jawan is and who Coach Howard is, and that trumps anything else that anybody else, any other thoughts that anybody else on the outside may have.
Greg, before the year, you said that you kind of mold some actions you could run off of your personnel. What creative things could you do with Connor and the gravity he has as a shooter, and just how important is it for him to become a good screener?
Yeah, I mean that's the evolution of a player. We've run a lot of things for him. We've added a lot of things within different packages. We have trees or branches, so to speak, that are specifically for him, and I think that'll only continue to grow over his career. But that is one thing that players learn when you get to college. When you're going to get chased and guarded so tightly that you have to become a better screener, got to become a better cutter. That'll help free him up. And I think our screeners or our bigger guys that are in those actions have gotten better at screening him for him, and he's gotten better at reading it. He's gotten better at setting up cuts. He got a foul at Penn State by stopping in the middle of a cut and getting run over from behind. So it's all those other little tricks that come with experience that he's picking up. And ironically, when he did that and got the foul, I think it was 5-6 possessions later, Andrew Funk did the same thing to him. Stopped and there was a collision, and so you learn those things of how to set up cuts, how to change your speed on cuts. Be a decoy, so to speak, at times. Play possum, play dead, and then come flying off a screen. So there's a lot of things that he allows us to do and have, like I said, created. Kind of a little branch that specifically revolves around what he does well.
Greg, you mentioned before that you liked the first 25 minutes, didn't like the last 15 minutes. I think Ohio State was similar, right? Great first half, not so great second
This
half.
was much worse.
Okay, my question to you is, are you baffled that happens? You can go from being what you want to what you don't like so quickly, or maybe baffled's not the right word. Give me a better one if you have it.
Yeah, no, I think in a true basketball sense, as a coach, looking back at 30 years of experience, you always wonder why one team does A so well and then turns around and doesn't, and what makes teams more consistent. I think some of it's experience. I think some of it's I still have to stop my own self and remind me the age of the guys I've got in different positions, that some of them don't have, even though they've been here for a little bit, don't have a tremendous amount of experience in being the guy or a group of the primary guys. I mean, we just talked about a freshman. I mean, a year ago he's running around in Fort Wayne, not getting guarded like he's getting guarded now. So there's just that's part of it. That's not the whole thing. I think we just have to continue to be more solid in the areas that make us good. I mean, Saturday it showed a little bit in the first half as you peel back the tape. We fouled too much, even though it didn't get us in deep trouble. There were some signs of that, and there were some signs of us not being good in transition defensively. It went from a little hint to a 6-alarm fire in the second half or whatever. I'm not a firefighter, so I don't know. What's the highest alarm? 5. Well, this was a 6, Ben, in the second half. So that's the thing you're always trying to understand. Just be solid. We don't have to make superhuman plays, and this group has to, hopefully through experience, figure out when one or two things go wrong. You can't turn that into a dozen things that went wrong, and it keeps snowballing on itself. So that's an area where we've got to mature and continue to grow.
Greg, this is kind of a more long-term question, so for that I apologize. You've said for years that the development of bigs, there's no straight line. I'm curious, the development of Hodges and Marcus this year, have you liked how they have grown after not playing a ton to the point where you think that they'll have a bigger role next year, or is that a position that you might have to take a closer look at the portal in the offseason? Just to add some depth at that spot.
Yeah,
next
I
year.
think we have to add depth regardless. I think that's. I'm not naive. We have to get bigger, more experienced, stronger, more athletic, whatever you want to throw out there. That'll be addressed down the road. I'm not going to address that today, but I think there's much like you mentioned the progression. I think my impression and my satisfaction or lack thereof has been not in a straight line. There's days where, yeah, Chris Hodges yesterday was really good playing Hunter Dickinson. Marcus Silvers had really good days playing on the scout team, and then come over and some days has been good, other days hasn't been able to translate that. And the biggest thing is probably the defense and the rebounding for Marcus's case, and just playing with more of an edge. That it's gotten better. He got a little scrum for the ball yesterday, and I didn't blow the whistle intentionally to see if he could fight his way out of it. Not fight. It's wrong. Can you make sure that you're going to get the ball taken from you? And he won that little mini battle. So that's a good sign. And it's all those little steps that he has to continue to show. And Chris's development is a little different because it just hasn't had as much experience. The speed of the game is something that he's continued to adjust to. But like I said, I think much like their development, there's days when it trends up, and there's days when it's got to be better.
Greg, I know it's harder to kind of keep up with some external things, especially this thick in the season. However, just talking about Jerry Pettigrew and how he's wrapping up his final season too, just a guy who means so much, not just to high school basketball, but basketball just as a whole to this state. What do you think about Jerry's career?
Man, I thought he was going to retire when I was playing against him back in the 80s. That's how long he's been going. And I always remind him every time I see him that I didn't lose to him when I was at Iowa Grant and he was at Cuba City, that 2-year, 88 and 89. He tries to claim otherwise, but I have the records to show that Iowa Grant beat Cuba City in both those years. So we were in the same conference actually then too for part of the time, and then there was a split in this. But he's on the Mount Rushmore of basketball in the state of Wisconsin. You talk about a guy that's given his life to the game in the state. When you coach 50 years at a place and have over 1,000 wins and have impacted so many lives and has done it so unselfishly, because he's grown the WBCA into the largest coaches organization in the country in basketball, and it just is constantly. I'll get texts from him late at night, or I'll see something that he tweeted about basketball, and I'm like, Coach, were you really watching an instructional video at 1 a.m. that you had to text me a question? But yeah, Coach, I was. And I'm not going to imitate his voice. You guys that have been around him, Mark knows the voice that he's got that's recognizable anywhere. But he's just a basketball junkie, he has given his heart and soul and his life. And I don't want to exclude Joan, his wife, either, because she's been right with him side by side, specifically in the evolution and growth of the WBCA. And then obviously you don't coach and have that much success over a half a century without a great partnership at home, and kids too. I know all his kids, and it's just I don't think there'll be another one like him, because I think in today's age, heck, they were probably trying to run him out of Cuba City in the 80s back. And that's just to be a high school coach and to withstand some of the things they have to put up with, to withstand the test of time and do it in such a successful way. And like I said, the biggest thing that jumps out to me about Jerry is how he's just constantly trying to help the game. And that's coaches, that's players, that's all-star banquets, that's all-state academics. You name it. right, Mark? You're on the board. We have more banquets and celebrations celebrating the game of basketball. It's unbelievable what he does and what that organization does, and Hall of Fame that's now at the Jag and the Dells. Like I said, he's at the top in terms of influential people in the game of basketball in the history of this state, regardless of any name you throw out. He's right there at the top.
Greg, with the shots Chucky's had at the end of some games recently, what kind of conversations have you had with him about how he can be better in those situations, and also making sure his confidence remains high that he can still make those plays for you at the end of games?
Well, some of it's not all. It doesn't all fall on Chucky's shoulders, because there's some in situations improper execution in other areas. So, but I think as a point guard, and he knew this back. We talked about this yesterday. I told him last summer that he had the keys to the bus when I decided I was going to make him my starting point guard a year ago. And I said, Chucky, you remember now, we talked about with that comes a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability, and at times comes a lot of, it's like being the quarterback, The backup quarterback's always the most popular guy because the starter doesn't do everything that they're supposed to do all the time. And being a point guard it's a difficult position, because you're either the hero or you're not, And for him, I think breaking down the technical aspects of it, finding out where he's comfortable, what shots he needs to get to, his ability to shoot the three, even though I didn't like the last one on Saturday and at the end of regulation, too far. But if you look at his analytics, him coming into a three, he's shooting almost 50%. So, but tie game, we're in the bonus, you got to get in the paint. Try to draw a foul, those things. Is he better with the ball screen, without a ball screen, with the slide screen, with another shooter running at him? Those are all things he continues to work through and what he's comfortable with. But I think the number one thing is, and I remember Bo having conversations with point guards of the past that struggled with that. You have to understand we have to get a shot. That's priority number one. We have to get a shot, and you want to get to Trey Jackson like the left elbow, so things to get him to the left elbow. Cam Taylor was more of a pull-up guy. Devin was more at the rim. If you remember the end of the Illinois game here in 2003. So guys are individually a little different in terms of how they get to their sweet spots, so to speak. And I've got to do a better job of continuing to find what he's most comfortable at and also get other guys involved. So that's been an ongoing thing over the last 24 hours of getting better at that. And he knew he wanted to attack on Saturday. That was the plan, the instructions coming out of the timeout, and his intention was, but due to other miscalculations on the floor and improper spacing, his ability to get there where he wanted to get to wasn't there. So then he was into a situation where he had to shoot the shot he shot, which is not what we want. So it's more than just, more goes into it than did the ball go in or not. We're trying to make sure and you want the ball in a playmaker's hands, a guy that can get to a pull-up, get to the rim, and he's, as I mentioned with Jim, in terms of I have to sometimes grab more patience, that he's still figuring some of these things out and is got a lot of basketball left to play.
Sorry, along those lines a little bit, you mentioned earlier in the moments when I think you said things can snowball and you need some maturity and experience to take over. That develops slowly sometimes. Is there something you can do in the interim and the now that you would like to see do better, that you can teach quickly and head off some of those moments?
Yeah, I think helping the team recognize, because as I always tell them, I don't have enough timeouts to save you from everything. So you have to be able to recognize what's going on, and that's always something. Sometimes that's good. So keep repeating what's being done well. But also when things don't go well, how can we intervene that doesn't require me taking I like to have at least 2 timeouts coming down the stretch. So if I burn one early, which on Saturday I decided not to because at the time when we were going through we were ready for the media timeout, and I watched that too. Is a media timeout coming? If it's really necessary, I will take one, but I want to have coming down the stretch, if at all possible, from that last media timeout to the end of the game, I'd like to have 2. One to adjust, one to avoid trouble if they get trapped or we're in a situation like that. So in my mind, that's what I'm looking at. So go back to your question, helping them auto-correct quicker on the floor, whether that's transition defense, whether that's, hey, guys, we fouled. To give you an example of how Saturday's game broke down, there was a 20-possession sequence where we gave up 33 points. We also fouled 9 times in 20 possessions. Now, what am I going to, other than in the timeouts, stop fouling, which we talked about in the first half. We fouled too much, as I mentioned earlier with Jim, that things started to show that we were not executing properly. Got to stop fouling. We had one possession where we fouled 4 times. So it's get a do-over. Well, you give a team enough do-overs, they're going to get one of them right. So just stop self-inflicting wounds. Stop fouling. Get back in transition. We fouled in transition, gave up baskets in transition. Don't get straight line driven. We did that 3 times specifically in the second half for direct layups or fouls or both. So how can you recognize those things on the court and get them corrected in those little mini huddles without me having to, petition the NCAA to allow us to have more timeouts. So that's the maturity part of it. That comes with, when you got a 5th-year senior last year leading those huddles, he was the coach on the floor. Now we're trying to still grow these guys, so to speak, in some areas, and specifically in the backcourt, helping those guys through those situations so they can communicate that and not only recognize, they recognize it. How do you get it fixed now and not waiting until we get to the next media timeout or I have to call another timeout?